It is raw as this. Good evening and welcome.
Now we need to focus on the case that everyone is talking about, Gabby Petito. According to the autopsy, the 22-year-old's manner of death has been ruled a homicide, while the cause of death has not yet been revealed. Investigators are still looking for her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, who is a person of interest in this investigation. Petito's remains were found in the Grand Teton region of Wyoming. A number of reports about the couple say that they were often fighting so bad that a bystander actually called 911. Petito and Laundrie were on a cross-country trip when she disappeared. During the trip, the couple became engulfed in a domestic dispute. The police were called and actually separated the couple for the night. I want to talk to you about the autopsy and what those results could mean. So Dr. Michael Bodden was on For the Record with our host and his wife, Linda Kenny Bodden. So let's actually hear what he had to say about the results of Gabby's autopsy.
Can you tell us in lay people's terms what this all means?
What it means is that the coroner and the police and FBI, they know that the cause of death is a homicide, is a murder. They don't want to release any more information than they have to. They've ruled out accident, suicide, or some kind of natural death. And they don't want to give away too much information while they're still looking for the perpetrator.
Okay, let's talk about this. Joining me right now, Deputy Public Defender from LA County, Philip Dubé, and trial attorney Bob Hill. It's great to have you both here. Bob, I'll start with you. Why is, if this is, as you heard from Dr. Bodden, this is now a homicide, not natural causes or something else, why is Brian Laundrie still classified, Bob, as a person of interest and not a suspect? Does that make you believe that maybe there is someone else here that the police are looking at?
Well, I think the other explanation is that they're trying to be very careful in the investigation. You know, we've seen other cases where people have argued, oh, they jumped to conclusions and targeted an individual. I think what they're trying to do here is be very methodical. He's a person of interest. They want to speak with him. And, you know, once they, have that opportunity to confront him, and that's why I think they're holding back on some of the details from the autopsy. So I think it's care in the investigation. They don't want to be vulnerable to an attack in that regard.
And now you heard, Philip, kind of Linda speaking with her husband there about what does that mean in terms of homicide. There could be involuntary manslaughter. It could be murder. Presuming, let's say, presuming it is Brian Laundrie who is responsible for this. There was one theory being put forward at the beginning of this case that maybe he just got into a fight with her, left her, and then, drove away. That doesn't seem to be the case, because if she had died from the elements, it wouldn't have been ruled a homicide. I mean, am I thinking of it the wrong way?
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's very apparent that somebody was intimately familiar with her. I mean, let's face it, they were together on this trip. Unless there is some evidence tying her to some scene where she was abandoned, he split, left her there all alone, and then some third-party hiker or transient happened upon her and took advantage of her. And who knows, maybe it was a robbery gone bad, or maybe it was even an attempted sexual assault gone bad. Who knows? We just don't have enough evidence, and that's why they're only calling him a person of interest. And again, to be fair, all he is just that, because so far we're not aware of any evidence that personally ties him to that crime scene.
Well, we talked to, actually had the opportunity here on Law and Crime. Michael Bryant actually interviewed the people who found that white van. Pretty incredible piece of this puzzle. Take a listen to a portion of this interview.
So you're traveling across the country, you're taking in some of nature's beauty, you're sharing that, and then this happens. Describe what happened.
Well, I mean, when we originally went to this spot in Spread Creek, we were just looking for a place to stay for the evening. And we had driven right past the van, and I was in the Jeep behind Kyle. And once we got hooked back up again, I was like, did you see that van? It had Florida plates. And Kyle was like, yeah, I saw the van. I want to go say hi. So then we had actually turned around. And then coming back, it looked still deserted. When we drove by it, it looked like it was just all dark inside. We couldn't see any activity. So we just kept on going.
See, and you know, when you look at this, Bob, it places Brian Laundrie in an even more difficult position because we know he drove back by himself that van in a key location with respect to Gabby's body. Clearly, when this first broke, we didn't know what information he had, but he probably knows. I mean, if he's not the killer, then he has the information at this point, which would make it seem so strange why he chose to lawyer up at the very beginning, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's no question here that, you know, he's got a lot of questions he's going to have to answer. And he's the only one that's really the closest connection to her in her final days. You know, how she died, whether it was at his hands, those are the things that law enforcement is trying to explore and find out. And they are also looking, you know, as Philip said, at other possibilities, because it's important in good police work to make sure that they rule everything else out, because they're going to have to need to establish that when they prove their case at a trial.
Not sure everybody understands, Philip, why, if the public now knows this was a homicide, you've released that information, why not release the cause of death at this point? How could that jeopardize the investigation? And again, is it have to do with the fact that Brian Laundrie still, we don't know where he is?
Right now, there's probably only 3 people in the galaxy who know what killed this young girl, and that's the coroner, law enforcement, and the actual killer. If you make it public and Brian Laundrie is brought in for questioning and he doesn't lawyer up or invoke his right to remain silent or ask for a lawyer, he may utter something that gives away details that were not made public that only the coroner, the cops, or he would know. So by keeping it mum at this point, he leaves his options open, and so does law enforcement. He's best advised just to keep his mouth shut like he did from day one. Here's the problem that I have, Bob, and that's a really good point, Philip, about that. The point that I have is, if I recall correctly, the Laundrie family attorney, when she disappeared and he came home, the very first thing, I recall this, is, and maybe someone could correct me if I'm wrong, the Laundrie family attorney said, we're hoping for Gabby's safe return. Now, if he knew that she was dead, if the Laundrie family knew that she was dead, why would you ever come out with that statement? Unless, of course, Brian came home and said, I can't talk about anything. Does that seem more likely now?
Well, the other thing that you got to be careful about is and usually defense counsel doesn't explore with their client whether they did a crime or not. They discuss the evidence against them, you know, their rights, what they want to do, especially at a preliminary stage like this, because otherwise the lawyer can walk a tight line on a potential obstruction charge. I mean, you know, before a warrant's issued with respect to someone, and then you get into accomplice liability exposure for those around the person. Before then, you know, if you mislead an investigation, you know, or if you have an obligation to disclose information, and there may not have been an obligation to affirmatively disclose information here at this point, but if you mislead and you suggest somebody's alive when they're not, and you do that knowingly, you know, that's a potential obstruction issue.
And it's not the same thing as if a client tells their attorney, hey, I'll tell you where the body's buried. The attorney has no obligation to tell law enforcement that information, but if you are perpetrating an ongoing crime or you are deliberately misleading an investigation, that's a problem. Now, let's go back to the relationship between Brian and Gabby. Again, they were pulled over in Utah. This domestic dispute, this body cam footage caught a lot. Take a look.
You talked to Gabby already?
Yeah, I just spoke to her.
Yeah.
So, you want to do me a favor? Let's go ahead and get you to step out of the vehicle, alrighty? Come on over here. You're not in any trouble right now. So, tell me what's going on.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her, so like I lock the car and I walk away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything, so I give her time, and we really had a nice morning, if anything, but she just got worked up because we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go hike arches before the Sunday time. Okay. We're just going into the park again to get water because we have a 6-gallon water container to fill up, so we're just grabbing water for the hike. Okay. And I was trying to keep everything calm and quiet because there's plans still to go for a hike, but
when I look at that, well, let me ask you, how do you look at that? Because I imagine in a future trial, in a potential trial, you could say, okay, well, you have this guy, he might have been attacking her. You have a witness who said that she saw him hitting her. Goes into that kind of consistent theme. On the other hand, when you couple this with the idea he had scratch marks, there was a search warrant for a hard drive in the van, and the big theme of that search warrant was that Gabby was maybe had these kind of mental health issues and couldn't be left on her own due to her anxiety. Now we're left with this as a homicide, but potentially manslaughter. Is this a case where it could be they got into a fight and he killed her, but not on purpose, that they struggled? I mean, are we dealing with that kind of situation, which would just make this even more of a gray area? I know it's speculating, but we are learning more details of their life leading up into this moment.
Yeah, a lot of it will depend on the actual cause of death. If she was strangled, a manual strangulation takes long enough to parry a blow or to restrain somebody who may be attacking you, where you can let go of the girl's neck. You don't have to keep throttling her. At some point, it crosses that line from restraining somebody, from calming them down, from parrying the blows to murder. I think what's going to be difficult if Brian is ever picked up and charged with murder is the admissibility of this evidence that went down in Utah. Keep in mind, we look at everything through a legal lens. If the homicide occurred in the National Teton Park of Wyoming, this domestic violence stop was in the state of Utah. And under Utah law, domestic violence requires an assault, which means there has to be some type of intent to do bodily injury. Unlike most other states, you don't have that intent requirement. All you need is just the unlawful infliction of bodily harm. So you don't have to intend bodily injury. So I'm not even sure that this evidence will even come in at a homicide trial in Wyoming, assuming it's picked up by the state or even by the Fed.
Yeah, and that could very well be true, that it might not be admissible. But the other thing is, Bob, and I heard what Philip had to say before about you don't want to give too many details of this investigation to the public, especially if Brian Laundrie's picked up. But could it also be that the cause of death is kind of nebulous in the sense maybe it was blunt force trauma? Did she hit her head on a rock? Was she hit in the head with a rock? And it maybe they're not telling the details right now because they're not really sure the whole story.
It could be both or either. I mean, obviously, what they're doing is, they have all these samplings, as Mike Bodden talked about in the earlier clip. There's a lot more that has to go into this. You have your coroner who looks at the overt signs and they send things for testing. They explore things he mentioned about the insects for the timing of death. Because what's critical here is, A, you have to identify body. B, you have to, confirm that it was a death and how the death was caused. The other part of that is the timing. And then, as we all know, a lot of these cases involve DNA and forensic studies that happen in lab work that could be weeks later.
We're going to continue to follow it, and we're going to continue to discuss it. Thanks so much, guys. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the latest in the Stanley Ford trial. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.